Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We're doing it live right here and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro. And just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek on Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And the on-demand Mottek on Money podcast at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Big day today, a winning day, and a record-shattering trifecta on Wall Street. All three of the major stock averages finishing at all-time highs today. This after the latest reading on inflation, which came in less hot than expected. It was the first time since March 21st that all three of the major stock market averages hit record closing highs on the same day. The rally also reflects the best consumer price index day performance for the Dow, the S&P 500, and the Russell 2K since November of last year. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 350 points, blowing past its previous record high close, which we saw at the end of March. The S&P 500 moved up 61 points, and the Nasdaq ending up 231 points. Record highs across the board today. This after the latest reading on inflation that came out this morning. The consumer price index came in better than expected, and that helped fuel the rally. Signs of cooling on the inflation front were helping drive stocks higher, and bond yields were moving lower today. Another reason for the rally, with the yield in the 10-year note now back down to 4.35%. Nervous times in the Middle East impacting the energy markets. We did see the price of oil give up early declines to turn higher, supported by a second weekly drop in a row for U.S. crude supplies. According to Market Watch, as a slowdown in the rate of inflation lifted prospects for interest rates cuts this year, along with expectations for energy demand. The price of oil did end higher today by 6 cents to 78.08 a barrel in New York. And Brent crude in London, the international benchmark, moved to 12 cents to 82.50 a barrel. Well, all that glitters is not gold. Turns out it's silver, too. Yep, silver rallying today to the highest settlement we've seen in about 11 years. Gold finishing the session at a more than 3-week high. Silver moving up more than $1 today to $29.73 an ounce, the highest seen since February of 2013. And the price of gold popped $35 higher to end at $23.94.90 an ounce, its highest settlement since April 19th. We've been hearing from the White House National Economic Council Director Lael Brainerd, point blank saying President Biden would raise taxes overall next year if he's reelected. This after Biden himself has said repeatedly he would have let the 2017 Trump tax cuts fully expire, which, by the way, is a violation of his pledge to not raise taxes on anyone earning less than $400,000. I'll discuss all that later this hour with America's leading taxpayer advocate, Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Coalition of Republican state attorneys general announcing the filing of 2 lawsuits against the Biden administration and the state of California challenging new emissions rules for trucks. Among other things, the lawsuits argue that California's statewide truck emissions rules are essentially a nationwide mandate due to California's ports' role as a major way station for shipping in cars. The California rules, by the way, would require half of all medium and heavy-duty vehicles acquired by state and local governments to be emissions-free between this year and 2026, turning to 100% by 2027. I'll discuss that and more and later this hour when we get into gear with our go-to car expert, Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Also, Tesla news with those layoffs and a lot going on there, too. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, the record-shattering rally today, the inflation reading, the whole works. Joining us live now, Ken Winans, money manager and president of Winans Investments, market historian, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2, and Forbes magazine contributor. Ken, thanks for taking the call here. Big day today for the market, sir.
Listen, I want to first thank you very much for having me on an up day. It seems like I'm your Dr. Doom. You always have me on the bad days. So thank you. I get to be on a record high across the board.
Yay.
And Frank, there is a lot of good news out there. There really is.
Well, let's hear it. We've seem to be climbing that wall of worry, and inflation, of course, a big part of it, and big sigh of relief here on inflation. What do you make of this latest reading we got today and the market reaction we've seen?
Well, I want to just preface it with this thought in mind. Our best and brightest are not in government, they are in business. And what I'm seeing across the board is regardless of the industry group, you're finding that these companies have managed to navigate a very tough inflation picture in the United States. As you mentioned, heavy regulation, concerns about taxes, everything else, but they are managing to pull ahead. And we came through an earnings season largely in one piece. And what I'm the most happy about, now you rattled off that we hit these new highs. I'm going to add the other question that needs to be asked is, how healthy is this rally? 83% of the companies that I track, and these are, by the way, the older companies, been at least publicly traded for 40 years. These are the old guys, excuse the pun. They're up. 83% of them are above their 200-day moving average, which in the layman's terms means are in an uptrend. And it ranges amongst the groups, but more important than that, it is very much a stock-to-stock, in the military terms, a dogfight type of market where some companies have figured it out, others have not. But largely, we're seeing that I don't think rates are going to come down at all, but these companies have figured out how to make money with rates where they are at.
On there live with money manager Ken Winans, and a lot of bubble talk now with the market here at record highs, and a lot of uncertainty on the board here, Ken. And of course, inflation's not yet licked, and if anything, there's still upward pressure with oil still above $80 a barrel, certainly in London, and nervous times in the Middle East. So a lot of wild cards out there.
There are, and part of Frank, you do such a great job of selecting your guests because we try to think outside, excuse the pun, think outside the box and talk about things that, quite frankly, no other station is even bothering to talk about. So let me talk about one. The one big difference between now and the inflation cycle of the 1970s is the strength of the dollar. Ask anybody who's planning to travel to Europe this year or Asia or anywhere else internationally. The dollar is very strong. I just talked to somebody the other day from Canada. I was just, somebody from Alberta, and they were talking about how expensive it was for them to come to the United States for a vacation. We are in that Goldilocks zone with our currency. Now, you have to be careful not to fall on your laurels with this, but what it means is that money internationally is flowing back into the United States, buying U.S. securities, whether they're bonds, stocks, or whatever else it may be, even real estate, that's coming over because it's showing stability. It doesn't mean we are great. It just means, as the old phrase goes, we're the least dirty shirt in the laundry hamper. So therefore, it might not be a bad place to be. And when you're in a geopolitical crisis, that's where you want to go, where it seems to be the most stable. And I think that's driving a lot of it. These inflows out of the emerging markets. A lot of the news today was bad out of the emerging markets, horrible news. And I think that anybody who's been putting money there is saying, if I can make money in the United States and I don't have to worry about currency fluctuations, that's where I should be.
Good time to go to Canada. Looks like $1 US is worth $1.36 Canadian, so we can live it up there. The Consumer Price Index did rise, by the way, up 0.3% in April, and that was just below the 0.4% expectation here. The core CPI, which takes out food and energy, was higher by 0.3% in April. So inflation is still edging higher and is higher than where the Fed wants it. We've been hearing a lot of Fed comments lately on where interest rates might go from here and the timing of any possible rate cut, maybe even a rate increase. But with this latest reading, which was very important today, Ken, what do you see ahead for the Fed's next move?
Mark my words, Frank, I do not think we'll see any change in interest rates policy for the remainder of 2024. And I think a lot of it's going to be predicated on who the next president is going to be. And if they're planning to raise taxes in 2025, whether it's expiration of previous tax cuts, because that states, especially blue states, will follow suit. They will raise their taxes. So if you have that happen, I think the Federal Reserve is going to be in a very tight situation to have to try to battle the inflation picture, and that could set the tone. But let's focus on this year. I think what you have to kind of think about is that, number one, there are green shoots in almost every industry group. I'm going to talk in a moment about real estate because, most people aren't even thinking about it. But the problem that we have, and I'm thinking about especially anybody in California, if you haven't traveled outside California to other places and seen just the tremendous build out in development that's happening in all the what I call the greater basin states, it's happening. I was at an event last night, Lieutenant Governor of Nevada. They're very proud of the fact that they are expanding and they've learned from past mistakes, common sense concepts to development. Road construction, bridges, whatever you may be. drainage. I mean, they've just thought it through. So you've got to be careful not to look at where you live and think the rest of the country is that way. It is not the case. So you've got to think about basically inflation is not the same state to state or even region to region within the country. But certain companies have figured out how to make it work, and they're prospering from it. Not long ago, I was asked what concerns me the most. And it's really if you have the situation where we start having more of what happened in Hollywood last year with the strikes. If you have more companies, especially in what I dare say blue states, striking because of just simply pressure on wages, that could really put a kibosh on this rally. If we get into second and third quarter earnings and companies are saying we're battling strikes and labor unrest and increases in healthcare costs and all these government mandated expenses, that we could have some unpleasant surprises in earnings going into the later half of the year. But as it is right now, I think the companies that are basically trending in an upward direction, trend is your friend, I would go with those. What I would tell the audience, if you have a stock that a company you've had for years, it is not performing well, it might even be an old company, it doesn't really matter. If it is not moving up in the rally right now, you might want to seriously think about dumping it, because I don't know what it would take to have that stock move going forward.
On the air live with Money Manager Ken Wines. Help us explain this one here, Ken. Just at a time when we are hearing that inflation is supposedly easing, all of a sudden gold has a big pop today of $35 an ounce higher, near its all-time high now, just below $2,400. And silver is suddenly at the highest in 11 years. These inflation hedges suddenly popping. What's going on there?
It's really funny. As you know, I'm now because I went through the certified cryptocurrency trader exam, and I monitor a broader spectrum of alternative investments. What I find very funny is a lot of people who used to be just only in crypto are now realizing they need to diversify, and they're talking about gold, silver, and other metals. I mean, now you have to be careful when you compare gold and silver. I know people typically throw that in the same box. It's different. Silver is an industrial metal, and I think that the fact that it's moving up, there's a lot of concerns about supply chain issues amongst what might be needed in silver going forward, especially in industry. Gold's a little different. Gold obviously is a precious metal, and particularly what's going on in China and India has real prominence of what happens with gold. So again, but I would just say this. When you have the metals moving in a positive direction, you have more demand than supply. That means the miners are going to kick it up, and you should see positive developments going on, especially in some of the emerging markets that need that revenue coming off those metals. So it's largely a positive. But Frank, what you just said, it's also showing signs that the inflationary war is not over. The fact gold particularly is moving back up, that tells you all you need to know. Globally, inflation is not under control.
Let me, if you can put that crypto hat back on for a second, do you like blockchain over gold chain now? Ken, by the way, Bitcoin popped. It's back above 66,000 here at the moment. Ethereum above 3,000, and Doge also moved slightly higher. So it was pretty broadly based financial market rally here today.
Frank, I have to listen. I'm going to date you here, buddy. You talk about Doge, but you never talk about any stable coin like Tether. We're gonna have to start adding Tether to your arsenal of crypto. Okay, let's agree on that.
Doge is fun to say, though.
Well, it is, and it's fascinating. The crypto. I have to admit, look, part of a job of a financial professional is that if you do not enjoy learning and exploring and really thinking differently about things, you're in the wrong industry. I remember a long time ago, a boss told me, you are in a brains business. People pay you for your brains, and it is so true. But I would just say this. As I look at the crypto spectrum right now, a couple of things are popping up. I actually, if you had me to pick between Bitcoin and Ethereum right now, I'd pick Ethos. I like it better because it's not getting into the halving problem, the demand problem. It's a whole different structure of a cryptocurrency, and certainly the fact that it's just a different animal entirely. I would lean more toward that, but I'm just having more and more people ask me about stablecoins. More and more, they believe in crypto, but they don't like the volatility of these 3 to 5% day swings going on. And so again, it's going to broaden out within the crypto world, but I think especially I would certainly not be surprised to see the stable coin, let's just put it, the stable of them available grow. And I know that I'm looking at it too, tokenization of a lot of indices. I think going in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to find a lot more availability, whether it's real estate, bonds, stocks, commodities. There will be more of those things that people might want to go into.
All right, Ken, before we let you off the hook here with the stock market at record highs here today, and indeed Bitcoin popping above 66,000, where are you putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Frank, I just had something interesting happen not long ago, and it's actually involving one of our listeners. We were talking about real estate, and they sent me an email, and we were talking about it, and they said, well, I don't like REITs. Here's a good example. Do not get caught up in an industry sector dictated by the ETF industry. You need to dig into the weeds. Real estate stocks pop today, especially the home builders. I mean, I'm with you. Lennar, Pulte, Hovnanian, they had a massive run. The REITs did not. So you're going to have to, if you're going to go into some of these really special areas like real estate, you've got to be willing to go into individual securities. So again, I find that most people are way underexposed in real estate, and maybe because of the bad taste that REITs have left them in, but take a good hard look at the home builders. I think they have room to run for the remainder of the year.
Ken, terrific. Well, congratulations. Record highs across the board here, and you led the show, so take a bow here. We do appreciate it. Money manager Ken Winans, president of Winans Investments, author of Investment Atlas 1 and 2, also Forbes magazine contributor, now also a crypto expert. Ken, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank. Take care.
Thanks very much, and we'll check where the action was today on Wall Street in just a moment. But first, the latest on your ride this afternoon, live here, 790 KABC. Friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate, and Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with the insurance companies, and, if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of that injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process, and the team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone right now under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes, you guessed it, James Taylor coming to the Hollywood Bowl May 29th. Tickets on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. Yep, you can get a pair of tickets to the show if you are caller 9 right now. Call now, 1-888-795-2222. Mottek Money continues here in 790 KBC. Record-shattering day for the stock market, with the Dow coming in for a closing gain of 350 points to 39,908 as inflation did pick higher, but not as much as most analysts had expected. The S&P 500 moved up 61 points to 5308, and the Nasdaq popped 231 points higher at 16,742. The yield in the 10-year note eased to 4.35%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates. Wild ride for cryptos also participating in today's rally. Bitcoin, for example, up $143. Now it's 66,231. Ethereum down to 2 at 3,019 here at the moment, and Doge at 15 cents. Checking the Magnificent Seven here, we see NVIDIA leading the charge, up more than $32 today to $946 and change. Tesla, in an otherwise up market, moved lower, down $356 at $173 and change. Alphabet, Google, up more than $2 at $172.51. And Apple also participating in today's rally for a change of more than $2 at $189.72. And you heard right, silver in the spotlight today. A new shine to silver, the highest price we've seen in 11 years. Silver moving higher by $1.03 at $29.73 an ounce today, the highest seen since February of 2013. And the price of gold also popped today, despite the Better than expected reading on inflation, up $35 an ounce at $2,394.90 an ounce, the highest seen since last month. And now the latest news for you here on 790 KBC. Mottek Money continues here, 790 KBC. Turning to taxes now. Longtime listeners of this program might think that President Biden is taking a page out of former Vice President Walter Mondale's playbook, promising to raise taxes if reelected. President Biden, through his chief economic advisor, said he would raise taxes next year if he's reelected. White House National Economic Council Director Lael Brainard point blank said the president would raise taxes overall next year if Biden is reelected. This after President Biden himself said repeatedly he would let the 2017 Trump tax cuts fully expire, which, by the way, is a violation of his own pledge to not raise taxes on anyone earning less than $400,000 a year. Biden's pledge is also being impacted by inflation. Let's bring in our leading taxpayer advocate, Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, thank you very much for taking the call on all this afternoon.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
So remember when Walter Mondale, debating President Reagan back in 1984, said, I'm going to raise taxes, and I'll tell you I'm going to do that. Of course, it was the biggest landslide victory ever seen in presidential election history when President Reagan was reelected in a landslide back in 84 after Mondale promised higher taxes. What's going to happen this time around?
Well, it does look like Biden is following the exact same playbook. Biden is saying not only will he allow the $4 trillion in Trump's Republican tax cut to spring back to life, $4 trillion over 10 years, over a decade. But he has made a list and been very specific about the list. He wants to take the capital gains tax higher than China's. China's at 20. He wants the American capital gains tax to be at 44.6% federal. If you live in California, by the way, that's 60% because you have to add the state tax to it, 60%. So you and your spouse start a business, buy a business, have a farm, have land, you improve it, you work on it, decade after decade, you're going to sell it. This is your retirement. This is your nest egg. And California and Biden take 60% of what you worked for all your life. Now, mind you, every year you paid personal income taxes. Every year you paid sales taxes. Every year you paid property taxes. Every year you paid Social Security taxes for your employees, okay? Then what you still have left, what you created during your lifetime, Biden would steal half. And then you wonder, why does somebody invest in China, 20% capital gains? Why wouldn't they invest in Biden's America, 60% tax in California, 44.5% in a state that had no income tax, okay? No state income tax. So this is devastating to the whole country. It's really a question of whether people focus on what the President Trump has said in speaking to New Jersey. They had that huge, very unexpected to me anyway, rally of tens of thousands of people in New Jersey, where he said, look, I'm going to have a tax cut for everyone, for the middle class, the lower class, the upper class, the business class. Everybody's going to get a tax cut. And Biden is saying everyone's going to have their taxes increased. Now, sometimes he's smart enough to say only the rich people. But unfortunately, if you're going to repeal the Trump tax cuts, even the New York Times and Washington Post admitted that cut taxes for just about every American who paid taxes.
On the air live with taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. You, of course, were around in '84. Remember, people couldn't vote for President Reagan fast enough. Didn't want to go back to the Carter days of high inflation and high interest rates, and higher taxes too, which President Reagan lowered. So people have an important choice to make here.
Yes, it's both the tax increases that Biden is promising and the inflation. Every dollar in your pocket is worth 18% less today than the day Biden was elected, because Biden was elected and because of the inflation and the spending that he did. So inflation makes the value of everything you own really worth less in real dollars. And Then he wants to tax it. He also has a new tax. He wants a second tax on the death tax to tax the inflation during your parents' lifetime or your lifetime. He wants to make sure that's taxed. Right now, that's not taxed because there's something called stepped up in basis. But Biden will say, oh, no, that 18% of imaginary gain, the 18% that I got through inflation, that's going to be taxed. They're going to steal as much as half of that, for crying out loud. That's amazing.
You're known to get your calculator out. This pledge that we keep hearing, pledging not to raise taxes on anyone earning less than $400,000. I know it's gotten a lot of Pinocchios in the past, but even more so now, right? Based on your latest article.
Oh, unfortunately, it's a lie. But remember, this is what Clinton did, and then Obama did, and then Biden did. They said, I'm going to give you a bunch of stuff for free. Oh, that's very nice. Well, where do you get the money? I'm going to take it from them, just the top 1%, maybe 2%, okay? And then, of course, there's not enough money there. So you have to move on the middle class with energy taxes, which hits everyone, and with Social Security taxes and sales taxes and property taxes. All of those taxes go up. So Biden and Obama and Clinton all raised taxes. 8 taxes in Obamacare hit the middle class directly. One of the first taxes that Obama passed was on cigarette smokers, average income $35,000 a year. He promised he'd never tax a lower income, middle income person. He decided to tax people who had an addiction. Nice guy. What a nice guy. What a sweet guy. I mean, talk about the phony baloney, I'm not going to tax you. Biden lied, Obama lied, Clinton lied. We shouldn't be surprised. But this cycle, Obama thinks he can tell you up front, I'm going to tax you. I'm sorry, Biden. Yes, thank you. Biden is going, I'm going to tax you. And he thinks people will buy it because everyone he talks to wants higher taxes because everyone he talks to gets paid by the government.
So now Lael Brainard, who, by the way, was once one of the top people of the Federal Reserve, now she's director of the White House National Economic Council. Anything else she's saying that's been getting your attention lately? She's been coming out lately and repeating basically what the president is promising to raise taxes.
Well, the Democrats are being, to a certain extent, at one level, accurate and honest. They cannot do what they intend to do to us without more money. So they're kind of stuck admitting we are going to have overall higher taxes. They're saying that, but then they're also turning to people and saying, but that doesn't mean you. Of course it does. Okay, of course it does. So they're telling the truth out of one side of their mouth and with some of the experts. And then they're kind of lying to the rest of us going, well, we're going to raise lots more money than we've ever raised before, $4 trillion worth more by getting rid of the Republican tax cuts, and $3 trillion worth more in the Democrat tax increase, $7 trillion over a decade, okay? We're going to get that money out of Fred, not you. Some guy in the corner is going to pay it. Nonsense. We're all going to pay it.
What's your reaction to this inflation number we got today, which came in slightly better than expected, but still higher? Inflation still is ticking higher, and we saw this market rally here today. What's the buzz there in Washington about inflation? We did see that consumer confidence reading recently, which tanked on higher inflation expectations. What's the reaction there to the big news today?
Well, sadly, it's not good news. It's bad news, okay? Inflation is the rate at which your dollar is getting worth less. So higher inflation means your dollar is becoming less valuable more quickly. Lower inflation means it's still getting worth less, just not as quickly as before. What matters is the value of the dollar. And the value of the dollar continues to go down. Not as fast as 2-3 years ago, but it keeps going down. That's the bad news.
Mentioned President Reagan at the beginning. Didn't you work with President Reagan in creating Americans for Tax Reform back in the day?
Absolutely. It was his idea. Americans for Tax Reform was set up to support the Tax Reform Act of 1986, which took the top rate to 27%. There were 2 rates, 15 and 27%. That was very helpful, good, strong growth. And the corporate rate was brought down to 34%. from 50. So it's very pro-growth, very helpful. Unfortunately, the Democrats started pushing back, and George Herbert Walker Bush, President Reagan's vice president, folded and agreed to some of those tax increases, but every Democrat president since then has raised the rates. So top rates now about 37%. We could have had this down to 15, 27, and below that. We still need to go there to be competitive with the rest of the world. We need to compete with the rest of the world by having lower taxes and lower regulatory costs. What Biden wants is high taxes, high regulation costs, and then we compete on low wages. I don't want to compete on lower wages than China, lower wages than Vietnam, lower wages than Europe. I want to compete on smaller government and less expensive government and high wages, not low wages.
Grover, thank you very much for joining us live here. Grover Norquist, President of Americans for Tax Reform, live this afternoon on Mottek on Money, 790 KABC. Mottek on Money continues on 790 KABC. Record-shattering day for the stock market. Across the board, record highs. The Dow up 350, S&P 500 up 61, the NASDAQ up 231 points. Tesla, though, going into reverse, down nearly $4 at 173 and change. Tesla still having issues. They fired virtually all of their electric vehicle charging division last month after high hopes. The charging chief there went to meet with Elon Musk about the network's future. 4 former charging network staffers speaking to Reuters about this. They had cut about 15 to 20% of their staffers 2 weeks earlier, part of much wider layoffs. And as you've been hearing in the news, looks like more people are out the door at Tesla. In the meantime, a coalition of Republican state attorneys general announcing the filing of 2 lawsuits against the Biden administration and the state of California challenging new emissions rules for trucks. Among other things, the lawsuits argue that California's statewide truck emissions rules are essentially a nationwide mandate because of California's ports' major role as a way station for shipping cars. The California rules, by the way, would require half of all medium and heavy-duty vehicles acquired by state and local governments to be emission-free between this year and 2026, turning to 100% by 2027. Joining us live now, Lauren Fix, our go-to car expert, editor-in-chief of Car Coach, and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Lauren, thanks for taking the call on this, and take it from the top and give us your reaction to the big news here today.
Well, first off, the state suing to block the U.S. rules and curb the tailpipe emissions in light cars and trucks. That's going to be interesting because the California Air Research Board has the say for the rest of the country, even though the Constitution says one state cannot make the rules for the other 49. So this is going to be interesting. I have a feeling this is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court because at some point, what may be good for California may not be good for the rest of the country, but no car company is going to build a vehicle for just one state, right? So we know that whatever they build for California, they're going to build for everyone, and that limits options for the rest of the country. So they're still looking to block all these mandates. And again, a lot of things may change in November, depending upon who wins the election. If it's Biden again, they're going to come down heavy, and they're going to mandate a lot of things that we may not like, and that includes something that I also found that you may have not seen 2 days ago, that California is going to raise gas taxes by 50 cents a gallon. That's every 2 years you're going to see, in the next 2 years it'll raise 50 cents per gallon every year. And that's not going to be in addition to your existing taxes.
Oh, yeah. We definitely saw it and been reporting on that. That is very, very big news. And the state senator who flagged that was on this program just about 24 hours ago. If anyone wants to hear it, just bring up the Mottek on Money podcast. So thanks for highlighting that. And that certainly is very big news for drivers here in Southern California and throughout the state. And Tesla having its issues. I know you've been reporting a lot about it with the recent firings and cutbacks. So the stock has come under pressure. What's your view on what's happening there at Tesla?
Well, Elon Musk is a unique guy. He said he wanted to cut 14% of the workforce. So the person in charge of the charging station said, well, I can't do that. I need these people if we're going to expand our charging stations. They just made a relationship with Ford, who is now already on the Tesla charging network, and they want to add in GM and everyone else who's jumping on board to do a partnership to use the same charging for any vehicle. So you'll be able to get an adapter, and all this sounds great. But if you shut down the charging infrastructure people that are Tesla-based, you've got a problem. So one thing I do know is that BP, we know they're a gas company, but they also own a company called BP Pulse. They've been buying up as many charging stations as they can, knowing that right now there's no one there to service these to make sure that everything's going as planned. So until Elon Musk decides that he's going to start hiring these people back or hire a whole new division, he may be looking to farm that out to cut costs, which may not be a bad idea because I'm sure the infrastructure costs are very expensive, even though they're subsidized by the government.
Very interesting. And you've been seeing the reports and the earnings reports, a lot of these EV makers losing thousands of dollars on every single vehicle. So what do you make of that? And are any of these about to go under?
Well, I think you may be seeing that coming with Fisker. They're trying to restructure, but you are seeing even, Ford's losing $130,000 on each vehicle. Now, they did invest a lot into the batteries and their infrastructure and building things out. GM is going a different route. I'm actually here in Detroit right now. We just drove the Chevy Silverado EV today. The drive impressions are embargoed, but they are on an Ultium platform. So that may be something that'll work. They've decided that they're going to offer EVs as well as gas or diesel on their half-ton trucks. So as the executive Mark Royce said today, he said, we are all going to coexist together, meaning we're going to have electric cars, gasoline, and diesel. And that's what General Motors thinks is the solution, where other brands are offering more hybrids. That's something you're going to start seeing more rolling out. There's a lot of government regulations. The federal government has their fingers in literally every aspect of the auto industry, and it's not good. The last time we saw this was in the UK, and we've discussed this in the past. They destroyed the UK industry for automotive, and let's hope that the government keeps their fingers out of our auto industry because it gives a lot of jobs, it impacts the economy, it impacts the stocks, it impacts literally everything in our lives.
Wow, well, we'll look forward to your updates from Motown, Lauren, and we appreciate you joining us live here this afternoon. That is Lauren Fix, Editor-in-Chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Be sure to follow her as well, and always great to have you with us here, Lauren. Thank you very much for taking the call from Detroit this afternoon.
Thank you.
This is Mottek on Money and a record-shattering day for the stock market. Repeating the big news today, all the major averages closing at record highs. The Dow up 350 points, settling at 39,908. The S&P 500 up 61 at 5308. And the NASDAQ powered up 231 points at 16,742. Bond yields easing. The yield in the 10-year note now at 4.35%. Bitcoin popping back above 66,000. This is Mottek on Money. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 tomorrow afternoon right here. Mottek on Money on 790 KBC.
Welcome to Talkville,
the ultimate Smallville rewatch podcast. Guest star Sarah Carter as Alicia Baker.
Although I didn't really work with her a lot. But Tom did, and they had some real big smoochy scenes.
Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Could there be any more sex? What was a 3-page makeout scene that just kept going? Good Lord. We get it. They have chemistry.
Jump in now or catch up on any of the past seasons of Talkville on YouTube or wherever you listen.